A dense forest in central France hides a vanished capital. This is Bibracte, the lost city of the Gauls, a place where chieftains plotted rebellion and Julius Caesar walked as a conqueror. By the end of our journey, you will understand how a single forgotten city rewrites the entire story of ancient Europe. We will walk its buried streets and uncover why a thriving metropolis was abandoned to the trees. How does a civilization simply disappear, and what do its silent stones still yearn to tell us? What does the fate of a forgotten city say about our own? Its story begins with the land itself on the windswept summit of Mont Beuvray. Rising nearly 3,000 feet above sea level, this mountain is not the tallest in the region, but its position is everything. From this high ground, you can see for miles in every direction, a panoramic view of forests and rolling hills that offered its inhabitants the ultimate early warning system. Any approaching army, any trade caravan winding its way along the river valleys below, would be spotted long before it arrived. This was not just a settlement, it was a fortress chosen with brilliant strategic intent. The Gauls called such a place an oppidum, a massive fortified town that served as a tribal capital, and Bibracte was one of the greatest of them all. Its power was built on control. The mountain stood at a crucial crossroads of ancient Europe. To the north lay the sources of prized amber from the Baltic coast. To the west were the tin mines of Brittany and Cornwall, a metal absolutely vital for making bronze. And from the south came the luxury goods of the Mediterranean, most notably Italian wine, which the Gallic aristocracy craved. Whoever held Bibracte controlled the flow of these riches across the continent. It was the beating economic heart of a vast network, a place where Celtic chieftains grew wealthy and their warriors gathered. This wealth and security made Bibracte the capital of the Aedui, a tribe the Romans considered their most powerful allies in Gaul, at least for a time. The city was far more than a collection of houses and workshops. It was the political nerve center where tribal councils met to debate war and peace. It was a sacred space where druids, the spiritual leaders of Gaul, performed rituals under open skies. For generations, it represented the pinnacle of independent Gallic civilization, a symbol of self-rule and cultural identity. To stand within its wooden palisades was to stand at the very heart of a free Gaul. Yet this commanding position, which made it so strong, would also make it a prime target for the one man determined to bring all of Gaul to its knees. But this powerful heart of Gaul would one day cease to beat. The story of Bibracte's end is as quiet as its beginning was dramatic. After the Roman conquest, the world changed. New Roman cities were founded in the valleys below, places like Augustogenum, modern-day Autun, built on the flat, fertile plains where roads and commerce flowed more easily. The strategic mountain fortress, so vital in an age of tribal warfare, became a logistical inconvenience in an era of Roman peace. Over the course of a few generations, the population of Bibracte simply drifted downhill. They took their skills, their memories, and their gods with them, leaving their timber and stone buildings to slowly collapse. The forest, patient and relentless, began its long reclamation. Within a few centuries, the great oppidum was swallowed by the earth and the trees, its name preserved only in crumbling manuscripts like the personal war diary of its most famous visitor, Julius Caesar. For over 1,000 years, Bibracte existed solely as a ghost in a text, a name scholars argued about on maps. Was it here or was it there? The mountain itself was known locally as Mont Beuvray, a place of shepherds and charcoal burners who occasionally turned up strange stones or bits of old metal in their fields, unaware they were walking atop a vanished capital. This long obscurity ended in the 19th century, fueled by a surge of national pride and a renewed fascination with France's ancient past. The catalyst was none other than Emperor Napoleon III, who took a personal interest in Gallic history and commissioned research to locate the key sites from Caesar's campaigns. Into this quest stepped a dedicated amateur archaeologist named Jacques-Gabriel Bouliet. Unlike the treasure hunters of his day, Bouliet was a meticulous man. He studied the ancient texts, walked the terrain of Mont Beuvray himself, and began a systematic search. What he found was not a single spectacular treasure, but something far more convincing: a pattern. He uncovered the faint but unmistakable lines of massive defensive walls, the foundations of hundreds of buildings, and workshops littered with the debris of ancient industry, Celtic coins and pottery fused by intense heat. Piece by painstaking piece, Bouliet assembled the evidence: the local folklore, the geographical descriptions from Caesar, and the physical ruins all aligned perfectly. In 1867, he made the definitive announcement: the lost city of the Aedui had been found. The ghost in the text had a physical address once more, waiting to tell its story. Bouliet's discovery opened a door, but stepping inside revealed a world that shattered expectations. The first great mystery of Bibracte lies in its very bones, in the layout of the city itself. For centuries, the Roman narrative painted the Gauls as wild, disorganized barbarians living in smoky huts, but the ground of Mont Beuvray tells a completely different story. This was not a haphazard collection of dwellings. It was a meticulously planned urban center, a testament to a society with a deep understanding of engineering and community organization. Walk with me through its ghostly streets. Archaeologists have mapped distinct districts, specialized zones that functioned like a modern city. There was a craftsmen's quarter where blacksmiths, glassmakers, and bronze workers plied their trades, the soil still thick with slag and workshop debris. Not far away, residential areas housed the city's population, with homes ranging from simple artisan dwellings to what were likely spacious halls for the elite. And woven through it all was evidence of commerce, of marketplaces where goods from across Europe changed hands. This separation of function shows a conscious urban plan, a society thinking about efficiency, noise, and the flow of daily life. Even more striking is the infrastructure. The city planners of Bibracte faced a constant challenge: water. A city of thousands on a mountain summit needs to manage rainfall and waste. Their solution was a complex, sophisticated drainage system. They cut channels lined with stone along the streets, designing them to follow the natural slope of the terrain, carrying water away from homes and public spaces to prevent flooding and erosion. This was not crude ditch digging. This was civil engineering. It required a collective understanding of hydraulics, of surveying, and long-term maintenance. Perhaps the most compelling clue to their advanced thinking is the street grid. While not the rigid right angles of a Roman military camp, the pathways of Bibracte show clear evidence of intentional planning. Main arteries were laid out to connect key points, like gates, to the central public spaces, with smaller lanes branching off to neighborhoods. This design controlled movement, allowed for defense, and created a sense of order. So who were these so-called barbarians? The city they built forces us to scrap the old stereotype. This was a coordinated society with architects, surveyors, and civic leaders capable of mobilizing labor for massive public works. They possessed and applied advanced technical knowledge long before the Romans arrived. Bibracte stands as a powerful correction to history, proving that complex urban civilization in Europe was not a Roman invention, but a tradition the Gauls had already mastered. And if their city planning was this sophisticated, what other secrets did their culture hold? Secrets that might be found not in their streets, but in the objects they left behind. The true scale of Bibracte's ambition is written in its walls. Encircling the entire mountaintop, stretching for miles, stood a barrier so formidable that even the Romans gave it a special name: the murus gallicus, the Gallic wall. To approach the city in its prime, you would have first confronted this monstrous edifice, a rampart of earth and stone towering over 30 feet high. But its true strength was hidden within, a secret of engineering that made it nearly impossible to burn or batter down. The core of the wall was not just piled rubble. It was a gigantic timber cage. Builders first constructed a massive latticework of heavy oak beams, crisscrossing them and fastening them with iron nails as long as a man's forearm. This rigid wooden skeleton was then packed solid with thousands of tons of earth and rubble stone. Finally, the entire exterior was faced with carefully fitted dry stone blocks, presenting a smooth, intimidating facade to the outside world. This design was genius. A conventional earthen rampart could be eroded by rain or scaled with ladders. A simple wooden palisade could be set ablaze, but the murus gallicus defied both attacks. The stone facing protected the earth core from weathering, and crucially, the internal timber lattice bound the entire structure together. Even if attackers managed to dislodge some of the outer stones, the wall would not collapse. It held itself in a powerful, resilient grip. The sheer amount of labor involved is staggering to contemplate. Just consider the timber alone. Each massive oak beam had to be felled from the surrounding forests, hauled up the steep mountainside, and precisely notched and joined. The iron for the nails had to be smelted and forged. The stone had to be quarried, shaped, and lifted into place. This was not a project for a single season. It was a generational undertaking, a continuous investment of communal effort that declared one thing unmistakably: we are here to stay, which leads us to the deeper mystery of its purpose. Certainly, the wall's primary function was defensive. In an era of frequent tribal conflict, it provided ultimate security for the city's people, livestock, and treasure. But was that all? Such a monumental construction is also a profound statement of identity and power. To build it required a highly organized society with a central authority capable of commanding vast resources and coordinating hundreds, perhaps thousands, of workers. The wall was a physical manifestation of the Aedui tribe's wealth, technical skill, and collective will. It said to visiting traders and rival chieftains alike, "Look what we can achieve." It transformed the entire mountain into a symbol, a permanent stamp of Gallic civilization on the landscape. Walking its overgrown course today, you can still feel that imposing presence. Archaeological cross-sections, like slices through time, reveal the intricate inner skeleton of wood and stone, a frozen moment of ancient ingenuity. Modern reconstructions help us grasp the wall's imposing height and the daunting task any attacker would face. It stands as the city's defiant spine. But if these walls were built to project power and ensure security, why did the city's heart ultimately stop beating? The answer may lie not in an attack from outside, but in a quieter, more profound transformation happening within the very homes and workshops the wall was built to protect. The silent stones of Bibracte whisper not just of power, but of incredible prosperity. To understand how this mountain city became a capital, we must follow the money, or more precisely, the treasures that flowed through its gates. The soil here is a ledger of ancient commerce, and every shard tells a story of far-reaching connections. Among the most telling finds are the broken pieces of wine amphorae, distinctive clay jars from Italy. For the Gallic elite, wine was not just a drink, it was the ultimate status symbol, a taste of Mediterranean sophistication. Finding these containers in such quantity high in the mountains means that merchants were making the arduous journey from the warm coasts of the Roman world, climbing specifically to reach the wealthy chieftains of Bibracte. They came because the Aedui had something valuable to trade. The region around Mont Beuvray is rich in high-quality iron ore. Excavations have revealed entire neighborhoods dedicated to metalworking, with furnaces, slag heaps, and workshops producing everything from everyday tools to finely crafted weapons. This iron was likely a key export traded south for that prized wine, but the trade web extended far beyond the Mediterranean. Archaeologists have also uncovered small, glowing pieces of amber from the distant Baltic coast, a luxury item used in jewelry and amulets. Even more strategically vital was the presence of tin, a metal essential for making bronze. While sources existed locally, the best tin came from Cornwall in Britain. Bibracte's position suggests it acted as a continental hub for this critical resource, funneling British tin south and east into Europe. This made the city a linchpin in a pan-European economy. The ultimate symbol of this economic clout was found in a modest workshop, a set of minting dies. These are the hardened metal stamps used to strike coins. Possessing them meant the Aedui minted their own currency, a profound declaration of economic sovereignty. They were not just trading, they were setting value, controlling their own financial destiny. This self-made wealth directly translated into political muscle. The Aedui used their riches to forge alliances, hire mercenaries, and influence neighboring tribes. For decades, this economic power underpinned their special status with Rome, a friendship of convenience where the Romans saw a useful, wealthy ally to help manage other Gauls. But such concentrated treasure also bred envy and made Bibracte itself a glittering prize. The very networks that built its greatness would eventually draw the gaze of a general who believed all of Gaul's wealth should belong to Rome. And when that general arrived, he did not come with an army at first. He arrived with a pen and a plan to write his own version of history. The wealth of Bibracte was forged in fire. Beneath the quiet soil of Mont Beuvray, archaeologists uncovered a landscape transformed by industry, a network of workshops where the very air would have thrummed with the sound of hammers and bellows. This was not small-scale craft, but large-scale production. The evidence is everywhere in the form of massive, layered slag heaps, the discarded byproduct of smelting that built up over decades like industrial dunes. These blackened mounds tell us that ironworking here was continuous and vast, a cornerstone of the city's identity. Scattered among them are the remains of the workshops themselves, stone foundations outlining spaces for furnaces, anvils, and quenching troughs. In these spaces, Celtic smiths mastered a material that defined an age. Their techniques were sophisticated. They built tall, efficient furnaces called bloomeries, capable of reaching the incredibly high temperatures needed to separate pure iron from raw ore. The process required deep knowledge of airflow, fuel, and chemistry, a knowledge passed down through generations. The result was a bloom, a spongy mass of iron that was then repeatedly heated and hammered to drive out impurities, a labor-intensive art that produced metal of exceptional quality. But the Celtic smith was more than a producer of raw material. He was an artist and an engineer. From this iron, they created the essential tools for a thriving society: plowshares that turned the earth, axes that cleared forests, and nails that held their great walls together. Yet their skill truly shone in two other realms, war and art. For warfare, they produced the legendary long slashing swords, deadly and elegant, as well as protective chainmail, a complex invention involving the meticulous linking of thousands of tiny rings. Each piece was a testament to both strength and meticulous craftsmanship, but perhaps most surprising was their artistic flair. The same hands that shaped weapons also created objects of stunning beauty: intricate brooches, bracelets with delicate patterns, and ceremonial items adorned with swirling, organic designs inspired by the natural world. This combination of utility and artistry reveals a culture that saw no divide between the functional and the sacred, between industry and identity. So what did this industrial heart mean for Bibracte? It meant everything. Control of such high-quality iron production translated directly into military supremacy. Well-armed warriors equipped with superior weapons and armor gave the Aedui a decisive edge over neighboring tribes. Economically, it made the city a manufacturing hub. They could export finished goods, not just raw ore, commanding higher prices and greater influence. This industrial capacity was the engine of their wealth, the foundation of their political power, and the very reason they could build a monumental capital atop a mountain. It made them indispensable and ultimately a target. For the man who would conquer Gaul, such a productive center was not just a city to be taken, but an industrial prize to be captured intact. Amidst the clamor of industry and politics, Bibracte held a quieter, deeper kind of power. Beyond the workshops and council halls, the spiritual heart of the city beat in its sacred groves. Unlike the Romans, who built stone temples to their gods, the Celts believed the divine resided in the natural world itself. A spring, a striking rock formation, or an ancient oak grove could be a portal to the other world. At Bibracte, archaeologists have found subtle but compelling traces of this belief system. They have uncovered deep, carefully dug pits filled with unusual deposits, not trash but deliberate placements. Some contain animal bones, often from specific species like pigs or dogs, arranged with care. Others hold broken but once beautiful objects, fine pottery, pieces of jewelry, or even weapons, all ritually killed by bending or breaking before burial. These are not random acts, they are votive offerings, gifts to the gods or spirits of the land, given in thanks, in plea, or to seal a sacred contract. The location of these pits is also telling, often on the periphery of inhabited areas or at boundaries, marking the transition between the human world and the wild. The orchestrators of these rituals were the Druids. They were far more than priests. They were the philosophers, judges, historians, and astronomers of Celtic society, a learned class that underwent decades of rigorous training, committing vast amounts of lore, poetry, and knowledge to memory. In a society without widespread literacy, the Druids were the living libraries, the keepers of tradition and cosmic order. In a place like Bibracte, the tribal capital, their influence would have been immense. It is easy to envision them presiding over ceremonies in a clearing among the tall oaks, perhaps during the great seasonal festivals like Samhain, which marked the end of the harvest and the beginning of winter. The air might have been thick with the smoke of sacred fires, the sound of chants, and the solemn tension of sacrifice. They would have been the ones to interpret omens, to advise chieftains on the will of the gods before a battle, and to mediate disputes with the authority of divine law. Their power was not in armies but in knowledge, and that made them a direct threat to a new order. When Rome set its sights on Gaul, it understood that conquest was not just about defeating armies, but about dismantling cultures. The Druids represented the core of independent Gallic identity, a source of authority that existed outside of Roman control. Julius Caesar himself wrote about them with a mix of fascination and political calculation, recognizing them as a unifying force that could rally resistance. The Roman suppression was systematic and brutal. Sacred groves, the very churches of the Celts, were deliberately cut down. The practice of Druidism was outlawed. This was a spiritual genocide, an attempt to sever the Gauls from their intellectual and religious roots, making them easier to assimilate. In Bibracte, this meant the quiet end of ceremonies in the forest clearings. The offering pits were filled and forgotten. The Druidic elite either fled, went into hiding, or were eliminated. What remains for us today are only these fragments, the silent archaeology of a profound loss. The absence of a grand temple is in itself the most poignant evidence. It speaks of a religion that lived in the land, and when that land was conquered, its voice was deliberately silenced. Yet, if the spiritual world of Bibracte faded, its final chapter would be written by the very man who chronicled its existence, a visitor who walked its streets not as a pilgrim, but as a master strategist seeing a prize he intended to claim. Sometimes the most direct voices from the past are not written words but buried treasure. Scattered in the fields and forests surrounding Mont Beuvray, archaeologists have made electrifying discoveries, caches of wealth deliberately hidden from the world. These are the Bibracte coin hoards, and each one is a time capsule sealed in a moment of high drama. One of the most spectacular was found not in the city itself, but in a nearby field. It was a simple clay pot forgotten for over 2,000 years. When researchers carefully opened it, they found it packed to the brim with coins, hundreds of them, a mix of silver and gold bearing the distinctive symbols and stylized horses of Celtic minting. Holding one of these coins is to hold a piece of Bibracte's economic soul, a token that paid for wine, weapons, and loyalty. But why was such immense wealth stuffed into a pot and buried? This is the central mystery that turns a financial artifact into a human story. The most compelling explanation is one of sheer panic. We know from Caesar's own account that his legions marched through this region. For the people of Bibracte, the sight of Roman columns on the horizon, the rumors of towns sacked and populations enslaved would have sparked utter terror. A wealthy family facing the imminent prospect of plunder would have had few options, burying their life savings in a secret location, intending to return when the danger passed, was a desperate but logical act. In this light, each hoard is a frozen moment of crisis. We can almost see the hurried digging in the dead of night, the pot lowered into the earth, the marker stone placed and then obscured. The tragedy etched into the archaeology is that so many of these people never returned to reclaim their treasure. Their secret died with them, leaving these coins to sleep for centuries. Yet panic is not the only possibility. The Celtic world viewed wealth and the earth in spiritual terms. Burying precious metal could also have been a profound religious act, an offering to the gods of the underworld in exchange for protection, fertility, or favor. The choice of location might have been ritually significant, near a spring, a distinctive tree, or a boundary. Some hoards contain coins that are deliberately bent or broken, a practice known as ritual killing, which makes them unsuitable for commerce but perfect as a sacred gift. So is a given pot a family's bank account or a community's plea to the divine? The answer may be both. In a time of existential threat, the lines between practical security and spiritual supplication would have blurred. A chieftain might have buried treasure both to hide it from Romans and to consecrate it to the gods, a double investment in survival. These silent hoards, therefore, speak volumes about Bibracte's final years. They map a landscape of fear and faith radiating out from the besieged oppidum. They tell us that the city's end was not a single event, but a prolonged period of dread where the very idea of a future became uncertain. The buried coins are the last desperate heartbeat of a free Gaul, a pulse that faded into the soil, waiting for a future it would never see. And if this was the fate of its wealth, what then became of the city's most famous, most unwilling guest, the man whose writings would both preserve and doom its memory? The conquest of Gaul did not end with a single battle, but with a slow, quiet transformation. As the Roman legions secured their victory, a new layer of life began to settle over the ancient Gallic stones of Bibracte. Archaeologists digging through the strata here find a fascinating and puzzling sequence. Directly atop the ruins of Celtic workshops and chieftains' halls, they uncover the unmistakable footprints of Rome, a forum for public business, the foundations of luxurious villas with underfloor heating, and most strikingly, the complex remains of Roman baths. This is the Romanization puzzle. The city was not razed, instead it was remodeled. The Aedui elite, the very families who had once led the resistance, now began to live like Romans. They built homes in the Roman style with courtyards and painted walls. They adopted the Roman habit of the daily bath, a social ritual as much as a hygienic one. They likely started wearing togas and speaking Latin in public affairs. On the surface, it looks like a swift and total surrender of identity. But was this a willing embrace of a superior culture or a forced act of survival? The answer is buried in the subtle details. The Roman baths at Bibracte are a perfect example. They are a masterpiece of engineering with hypocaust systems of raised floors and clay pipes to circulate hot air and separate rooms for hot, warm, and cold bathing. To build them required immense wealth and access to specialized Roman architects and engineers. This suggests the local aristocracy had both the resources and the desire to replicate the pinnacle of Roman comfort. They were buying into a new Mediterranean ideal of civilized living. Yet, look closer at the artifacts found within these very baths. Alongside fine imported Roman pottery, archaeologists continue to find traditional Celtic fibulae, those distinctive brooches used to fasten clothing. It is a small, personal detail that speaks volumes. In the privacy of their own homes, did these families still wear their traditional dress? Did they speak their native tongue? The cultural shift was likely a complex negotiation, not a clean break. For the Aedui nobility, aligning with Rome was a pragmatic strategy. It was the only way to retain any form of influence, wealth, and social standing in the New World Order. By adopting the outward symbols of Roman power, they secured a place in the provincial administration. Their children would have been educated in Roman schools, their disputes settled in Roman courts. This was assimilation as a means of self-preservation, but this cultural transition created a profound social rift. The elite could afford villas and baths. What of the common people, the blacksmiths, potters, and farmers? For them, the benefits of Romanization were far less clear. The new Roman city of Augustogenum, built in the valley below, offered flat land, easy water access, and the economic pull of major new roads. Gradually, the lifeblood of Bibracte, its people, began to drain away to this more convenient Roman model. The mountain oppidum, for all its new Roman veneer, was becoming irrelevant. So the fate of Bibracte was not a dramatic death by sword, but a slow fading by choice. The Roman buildings were not a rebirth, but a final, elegant chapter. They represent a desperate and calculated adaptation by a ruling class trying to navigate extinction. In the end, the ultimate symbol of Romanization was not the bathhouse, but the empty street. The city was not destroyed, it was simply left behind, a magnificent stage after the actors had all moved to a new theater in the valley below. The year is 52 BC, and the air in Bibracte crackles with a dangerous new energy. Julius Caesar, fresh from a brutal campaign across the Alps, has returned to Gaul expecting submission. Instead, he finds a conspiracy brewing in the very heart of his most trusted allied territory. Inside the great halls of the Aedui capital, chieftains from across the land have gathered in secret. They are not here to pay tribute to Rome, they are here to plot its destruction. This clandestine meeting would become one of the most dramatic assemblies in ancient history, and at its center was a young, charismatic noble from the rival Arvani tribe, a man named Vercingetorix. Imagine the tension in that room. These were leaders from tribes with generations of feuds and rivalries, their pride as fierce as their warriors. Yet Caesar's relentless campaigns, his policy of divide and conquer, had made one truth brutally clear: alone they would all be picked off. The only path to survival was unity. Vercingetorix, whose name itself meant Supreme King of Warriors, argued not just for battle but for a new kind of war. He proposed a scorched earth strategy, sacrificing their own towns and fields to deny the Roman legions any supplies, a desperate, total commitment to freedom. In a moment of extraordinary defiance, the council elevated this outsider to supreme command of all the Gallic forces. With that decision, Bibracte was transformed. It was no longer just the capital of the Aedui, it became the symbolic headquarters of a united Gaul, the nerve center of a rebellion that would shake the Roman Republic to its core. The precise spot where this fateful vote took place remains one of Bibracte's enduring mysteries. Was it in a traditional Celtic longhouse, the air thick with smoke and the smell of ale, or perhaps in the new Roman-style forum, a deliberate irony of using a symbol of the new order to plan its overthrow? Archaeologists have searched for a structure grand enough to host such a monumental gathering, but no definitive hall has been found. This absence is itself telling. The meeting may have been held in a temporary space or in a building whose wooden structure left only faint traces, a ghost of a moment too dangerous to be permanently etched in stone. The drama of that assembly lies in its sheer improbability. The Aedui, long-time allies of Rome, were hosting the man who would become Rome's greatest enemy in Gaul. It was an act of breathtaking political treason and a testament to how deeply Caesar's actions had alienated even his friends. By choosing Bibracte, Vercingetorix and the chieftains made a powerful statement. They were claiming the intellectual, political, and industrial heart of Gaul as the soul of their resistance. Every sword forged in its workshops, every coin minted in its shops would now fuel the rebellion. For a brief, blazing moment, the mountain fortress became the capital of a dream, a free and independent Gaul. It was a dream that would draw Caesar back to this mountain, not as a political visitor, but as a besieging general intent on crushing the hope that was born within its walls. The rebellion born in its halls would die on a distant hilltop. The defeat of Vercingetorix at Alesia in 52 BC shattered the dream of a united Gaul, but the final act of the drama returned to where it began. With the last Gallic army broken and its leader captured, Julius Caesar did something profoundly symbolic. He marched his legions back to Bibracte and ordered them to make their winter camp there. The victor now took up residence in the very capital of the defeated rebellion. For the surviving Aedui, the sight must have been a daily torment. Roman soldiers now patrolled their sacred streets, their laughter echoing through the same gates that had recently welcomed conspirators. The great hall where Vercingetorix was proclaimed commander now likely served as a Roman command post. This was not merely a logistical decision, it was a masterstroke of psychological warfare, a deliberate demonstration of total dominance. The message was unmistakable: your home is now our barracks, your heartland is now our possession. It is here, amidst this tense and quiet occupation, that Caesar performed one of history's most influential acts of writing. In his winter quarters, he began drafting his commentaries on the Gallic War. Picture the scene: the Roman general, surrounded by the subdued energy of a conquered people, sitting down to write the definitive account of their subjugation. The irony is breathtaking. He was composing his version of events, his justification for the war, from inside the enemy's own headquarters. Every word he wrote about Gallic savagery, Roman benevolence, and military necessity was penned under the roof of those he had just crushed. This was not just record-keeping, it was the first draft of history authored by the conqueror from the conquered's home. For centuries, his narrative would be the primary lens through which the Gauls and Bibracte itself were understood. He immortalized the city even as he oversaw its decline. What physical trace did this monumental winter leave behind? Archaeologists have searched for clear evidence of Caesar's specific presence, a general's villa or a praetorium, but the trail is faint. They have found remnants of sturdy Roman military barracks from this period, structures built with efficiency and scale different from earlier Gallic buildings. More telling are the small, personal artifacts, Roman coins minted during those years, fragments of Italian wine amphorae of a quality reserved for the elite, and pieces of military equipment. These objects sketch a portrait of an occupying force settling in for a long, cold season. The most compelling evidence, however, is strategic: the choice of Bibracte itself. It was perfectly situated to project power over a pacified but restless region, a central fortress from which Roman authority could radiate outward during the vulnerable winter months. His presence there ensured no new spark of rebellion could be kindled in its ashes. The psychological impact on the Gauls of Bibracte is almost too heavy to grasp. To see the architect of their ruin walking their streets, to be forced to supply his troops with food and fuel from their own depleted stores, was a humiliation woven into daily life. The spiritual heart of their resistance was now a Roman administrative center. The Druids were gone, the chieftains subdued or collaborating, and the clang of the forge now served the legions. Caesar's writing project added a final, cruel layer. He was not just occupying their space, he was commandeering their story. As he shaped the narrative of the war for a Roman audience, the survivors had to live with the silent knowledge that their truth, their experience of loss and betrayal, might be erased forever. His winter in Bibracte was the quiet, bureaucratic conclusion to a violent war, a demonstration that true conquest happens not just on the battlefield, but in the mind and in the historical record. And as the general packed his scrolls and marched his legions out with the spring thaw, what future remained for a city that had served its purpose for both Gaul and Rome? The silence of Bibracte's streets is its loudest mystery. Within a single human lifetime after Caesar's legions departed, this bustling capital was completely empty, left to the wind and the creeping roots of the forest. Its people did not flee a disaster. They walked away downhill to a new Roman city called Augustogenum, known today as Autun. This deliberate abandonment is the final, haunting puzzle of the city. Why would a powerful society leave its ancestral home, the fortress that had protected them for centuries, for a brand new settlement in the valley below? The answer is not simple, and the empty streets whisper of several intertwined pressures. The first theory is one of political engineering. Rome was brilliant at dismantling old power structures to prevent rebellion. Bibracte, perched on its mountain, was a natural stronghold, a symbol of Gallic independence and a perfect base for future resistance. By encouraging, or perhaps subtly forcing, the population to move to a new city in the open valley, the Romans neutralized that threat. Augustogenum was laid out on a classic Roman grid, with straight roads leading directly to a central forum. This design made it easy to monitor and control the population. There were no hidden alleys or defensive heights from which to launch an uprising. Moving the people here was like moving them from a fortified castle into an open field, where Roman authority could watch every move. It was a masterstroke of pacification disguised as urban development. Alongside this political calculation was a powerful economic pull. The Roman world ran on roads and rivers. The new city of Autun was built on flat land along a major trade route. For merchants, this was a dream compared to the arduous climb up Mont Beuvray. Goods could be loaded and unloaded easily, markets could expand, and profits could grow. The old mountain oppidum, for all its strategic genius in an age of tribal war, was a logistical bottleneck in an era of imperial commerce. The economic heart of the region simply followed the path of least resistance, flowing downhill to where the money was easier to make. This leads to the most human layer of the mystery: choice. For the Aedui aristocracy, those who had survived the conquest, embracing Roman life was not just safe, it was fashionable and advantageous. In Autun, they could build lavish villas with mosaic floors and heated baths, amenities that were difficult to engineer on a windswept mountaintop. Their children could attend the famous Roman school established there, gaining the education needed for careers in the imperial administration. By moving, they were not just relocating, they were upgrading, trading the rugged symbolism of their past for the comfortable privileges of a Roman future. They chose integration over isolation, so the abandonment was likely all of these things: a coercive push from Rome, an economic pull from the new trade routes, and a voluntary leap by an elite class seeking a place in the new world order. The common people, the craftsmen and farmers, would have had little choice but to follow the power and the economy. The forges grew cold, the houses were stripped of their useful timber and stone, and the great murus gallicus, that masterpiece of defense, stood guard over nothing. The forest did not conquer Bibracte. It simply moved in after everyone had left, patiently weaving a green shroud over a decision that ended an era. What remains for us now is the ghost city itself, a place where every stone is a question, and the act of finding it became the next great chapter in its long story. A city of thousands cannot survive on a mountain without one vital resource. The true genius of Bibracte is not just in its walls or workshops, but in what flowed beneath its streets. Archaeologists peeling back the layers have uncovered a hidden circulatory system, a complex network of wells, cisterns, and channels that solved an immense engineering challenge. How do you provide fresh water and manage waste for a dense urban population perched high above any major river? The answer reveals a society thinking generations ahead. Scattered across the oppidum, they dug deep wells, some reaching down over 30 feet through solid rock to tap into the mountain's groundwater. This was back-breaking work with simple tools, a communal investment in survival. But wells alone were not enough. They also constructed large, stone-lined cisterns to capture and store precious rainwater from rooftops. This dual system, drawing from both below and above, shows an understanding of resource diversification, of not putting all their eggs in one basket. The most impressive feat, however, was managing what happened after the water was used. They engineered a sophisticated drainage network. Along the main streets, craftsmen cut carefully graded channels into the bedrock, lining them with flat stones. These weren't just ditches, they were designed with a calculated slope, using gravity to pull runoff and waste water away from residential areas and public spaces, funneling it safely out beyond the city's walls. This prevented catastrophic erosion, minimized flooding during storms, and critically, reduced the risk of waterborne disease. It was a public health infrastructure built from stone and common sense. We often marvel at Roman aqueducts, those towering stone bridges marching across valleys, and rightly so. But comparing them to Bibracte's system is like comparing a spectacular highway to an intricate network of neighborhood streets. The Roman solution was a monumental, centralized feat of imperial power, bringing water from a single, distant source. The Gallic solution was decentralized, resilient, and adapted to the local terrain. It required no vast slave labor or imperial treasury, but instead relied on community coordination and a deep, shared understanding of the immediate landscape. One was a show of dominance over nature, the other a clever collaboration with it. This hidden web of water tells us that the people of Bibracte were not just reacting to problems, they were anticipating them. Planning and maintaining such a system required a strong communal authority and a collective commitment to public welfare. It speaks of meetings where elders and engineers debated gradients and overflow routes, of neighbors agreeing to maintain the channel in front of their home. This was engineering in service of daily life, a quiet, practical marvel that allowed a mountaintop to feel not like a rugged fortress, but like a true, livable city. It proves that advanced civilization is not defined by one style of architecture, but by the ability to solve fundamental human problems with ingenuity and shared purpose. The grand political dramas of Bibracte were ultimately framed by the simple rhythm of daily life. To truly know the Gauls, we must step inside their homes, not their halls of power. Scattered across the oppidum, the faint, dark stains in the soil mark where wooden posts once stood, outlining the footprints of family dwellings. These were not the stone villas of Rome, but sturdy structures built from timber, wattle, and daub. The most common design was the roundhouse, a circular building with a conical thatched roof centered around a single, vital hearth. The hearth was the literal and symbolic heart of the home, providing warmth, light, and a place to cook. Its constant smoke would have seeped into the thatch, acting as a preservative and filling the air with a distinctive, earthy scent. In later periods, as Roman influence grew, more rectangular buildings appeared, reflecting a shift in architectural fashion. But whether round or square, these homes were intimate spaces, likely housing an extended family. The darkness inside, pierced only by firelight and the light from the doorway, would have made the home a world of shadows and close conversation, a private refuge from the public life of the fortified city. What filled these homes? The answer is written in the trash heaps. Archaeologists sifting through ancient refuse find a detailed menu of Gallic life. Animal bones reveal a diet centered on livestock, with a high proportion of pork, a meat highly prized by the Celts. They also ate beef, goat, and sheep, and supplemented this with hunting, bringing in deer and wild boar from the surrounding forests. But it wasn't all meat. Carbonized seeds and plant remains tell another story. They grew barley and wheat, grinding it into flour for bread or porridge. They harvested lentils, peas, and beans, and gathered apples, berries, and nuts. This was a balanced, robust diet that fueled the people building walls and forging iron. The evidence of food storage, like large ceramic jars and pits lined with stone, shows they planned for the winter, smoking meats and preserving harvests to survive the harsh mountain months. A meal in Bibracte was a direct connection to the land they controlled, a daily reminder of their self-sufficiency. The most touching connections to these people, however, are the small, personal possessions they left behind. These are the objects that had nothing to do with politics or war, and everything to do with identity and care. In the soil of the residential quarters, we find delicate bronze fibulae, those ornate brooches used to fasten tunics and cloaks. Each one is a small masterpiece of Celtic art, with intricate swirls and curves inspired by nature. A woman might have worn one as both a practical fastener and a statement of beauty or status. We find spindle whorls, simple clay or stone discs used in spinning wool, hinting at the hours spent creating cloth for the family. There are simple gaming pieces suggesting moments of leisure and fine pottery, both locally made courseware for everyday use and elegant imported cups for special occasions. Tools like iron knives, needles, and awls speak of constant repair and creation. Each of these items was touched, used, and valued by someone. A broken fibula, carefully kept, might have held sentimental value. A child's small pottery cup tells of a family meal. These artifacts are the echoes of mundane moments, the quiet backdrop against which the great historical events played out. So what does this domestic picture reveal about Gallic society within this powerful center? It shows a stark contrast. Outside the home, Bibracte was a place of fierce political maneuvering, industrial might, and monumental architecture. Inside the home, life was anchored in traditional rhythms, skilled craftsmanship, and close kinship ties. The social structure was likely hierarchical, with chieftains and wealthy metalworkers living in larger, better appointed homes, while common laborers lived more simply. Yet the shared material culture, the similar styles of jewelry and pottery found across different districts, suggests a strong, unifying cultural identity. They were Aedui, they were Gauls, and their daily habits, from the food they ate to the clothes they fastened, reinforced that belonging every single day. The mystery of their everyday life solves a larger puzzle. It shows that a civilization is not defined by its battles or its treaties alone, but by the accumulated weight of countless ordinary days. The strength of Bibracte did not just come from its walls, but from the families who felt protected by them, who cooked meals, repaired tools, and raised children within their shadow. This vibrant domestic world makes their ultimate choice to leave the mountain all the more profound, a quiet end written not in battle, but in the decision to pack up these very personal belongings and walk away for good. The tools and weapons of Bibracte were more than functional objects. They were canvases for a unique vision of the world. Among the most breathtaking discoveries from the mountain are pieces of exquisite metalwork, jewelry, and pottery that shimmer with a distinct artistic language. This is the Latine style, named for a site in Switzerland where it was first identified, and its presence at Bibracte speaks of a deep, sophisticated cultural identity. Unlike the realistic human figures of Greek sculpture or the grand historical narratives of Roman art, Latine art is an exploration of abstraction and fluidity. Its defining characteristic is the graceful, dynamic curve. Artists took forms from nature, the spiral of a fern, the curve of a vine, the sweep of a bird's wing, and distilled them into pure, flowing lines. On a bronze fibula, these lines might weave around each other in an endless, hypnotic knotwork. On the handle of a fine iron dagger, they could cascade like liquid metal, transforming a weapon into a ceremonial object. This was art that suggested motion and life, where patterns seemed to breathe and grow right before your eyes. The skill required was immense. Celtic metalsmiths used techniques like repoussé, hammering designs from the back of a thin sheet of metal to raise them in relief on the front, and intricate filigree, twisting fine wires of gold or silver into delicate patterns. They inlaid different metals together, creating contrasts of color and texture. A simple brooch to fasten a cloak became a statement of artistic philosophy, a portable piece of the Celtic soul. But this artistry was not confined to personal adornment. It infused everything: pottery found at Bibracte, even everyday cooking vessels, sometimes bears stamped or incised patterns of circles and waves. More precious glass ornaments, beads with swirling marbled colors, show a mastery of manipulating molten glass to capture that same sense of organic flow. This widespread aesthetic tells us something profound. Beauty and symbolic meaning were woven into the fabric of daily existence, not reserved for temples or palaces. So what worldview does this art express? The avoidance of realistic human or animal forms suggests a different relationship with the spiritual. The gods were not seen as people to be depicted, but as forces, energies present in the natural world. The swirling, interconnected patterns of Latin art may reflect this belief, a visual representation of a universe where everything is linked, where the boundary between the physical and spiritual realms is fluid and permeable. The endless knot with no beginning and no end could symbolize eternity, the cycle of life, or the interconnectedness of all things. Wearing or using these objects was not just about decoration, it was a way of carrying a map of the cosmos, a reminder of one's place within a living, sacred order. In the context of Bibracte, this artistic flourishing takes on a poignant significance. Here was a society under immense pressure, caught between its own traditions and the overwhelming influence of Rome. The persistence of the Latin style, even as Roman goods flooded in, was an act of quiet cultural resistance. Choosing to wear a traditional fibula with Celtic swirls rather than a Roman-style pin was a personal declaration of identity. It was a way of saying, "We are not you. Our vision of the world is different." This makes the artifacts from Bibracte more than archaeological treasures. They are fragments of a lost philosophy, a testament to a people who saw beauty in abstraction and believed the universe was written in a language of elegant, eternal curves. Their art was their voice, and long after their political power faded, that voice still echoes from the soil, asking us to see the world not just as it is, but as a beautiful, interconnected pattern. But a city is more than the lives lived within it. It is also defined by how it honors its dead. On the slopes surrounding Mont Beuvray, hidden in the forests and fields, lie the silent neighborhoods of the afterlife, the necropolises of Bibracte. These burial grounds hold the final, unspoken testimonies of the people who called this mountain home, and each grave is a carefully composed message meant to last for eternity. The variety in these tombs paints a vivid picture of a society with a deep belief in an afterlife and a rigid sense of social order. For the common people, burial was often simple, a humble inhumation in a plain pit with perhaps a single pot or a personal brooch placed alongside the body. It was a quiet farewell, a gesture of care meant to equip the soul for its journey. For the elite, however, death was a spectacular event, a final display of power that cemented their status for both the living and the dead. The most striking examples are the chariot burials, reserved for the highest nobility, perhaps chieftains or legendary warriors. In these graves, archaeologists have found the complete skeleton of a two-wheeled war chariot, often placed upright or dismantled and carefully arranged around the deceased. The individual would be laid out with their finest possessions, a sword, a shield, a lance, and sometimes even the remains of horses, suggesting the chariot team was sacrificed to accompany their master. This was not a practical send-off, it was a symbolic one. The chariot represented speed, prestige, and martial authority, the ultimate vehicle for a leader's final voyage into the next world. It declared that the social hierarchy of the living world was expected to continue in the realm of the spirits. Alongside these chariot burials are the warrior graves, more numerous but no less eloquent. These men were buried with their full panoply of war, a long iron sword in its scabbard, a spear, and sometimes a helmet. The weapons are often placed with deliberate care, the sword on the chest or by the side, the spear aligned with the body. In some cases, the weapons show signs of ritual damage, a bent spear point or a nicked sword blade, a practice known as killing the object. This act is crucial to the mystery. Were they killing the weapon so its spiritual essence could travel with the warrior, or were they deliberately taking it out of circulation in the world of the living, a permanent sacrifice to mark the gravity of the loss? The presence of joints of meat like pork or beef and drinking vessels in these graves adds another layer. They suggest a belief that the afterlife mirrored this one, requiring sustenance, companionship, and the tools of one's station. The true puzzle for archaeologists lies in interpreting these silent rites. Is a grave a window into spiritual beliefs or a political statement for the living? The answer is almost certainly both. The careful placement of goods speaks to a profound belief in a continued existence. Sending a chieftain with his chariot implies an expectation that he would need it, that the otherworld was a place where battles might still be fought and status still displayed. The food and drink suggest a need for sustenance on the journey. Yet, the sheer spectacle of a chariot burial also served a vital function for those left behind. It was a public ceremony, a powerful reinforcement of the social order. By witnessing the immense wealth and honor buried with their leader, the community reaffirmed the family's right to rule. It was a transaction between the living and the dead, where the deceased took their status with them, and the living family solidified their claim to that inherited power. The variation in these practices across time also tells a story of change. Earlier burials tend to be richer in traditional Celtic goods. Later burials from the period just before and after the Roman conquest begin to show a fascinating mix. A warrior might be buried with his ancestral sword, but also with a Roman wine jug or a fine imported cup. This blending in death reflects the blending in life, a hesitant negotiation of identity where old beliefs met new influences. The grave becomes a final, personal compromise, a last attempt to navigate two worlds. So the necropolises of Bibracte are not just collections of bones and artifacts, they are archives of hope and anxiety. They hold the community's deepest questions about what lies beyond the final horizon, and their most calculated statements about power and memory in the world they are leaving behind. In the end, these tombs offer a poignant truth that to understand how a people lived, you must also see how they prepared for what they believed came next. The voices of Bibracte are the hardest ghosts to hear. While its walls and workshops speak clearly, the actual words spoken in its streets have almost vanished. This is the linguistic enigma of the lost city. We know from Caesar and from archaeology that the Aedui were Gauls, and their native tongue was Gaulish, a Celtic language cousin to those spoken in ancient Britain and Ireland. Yet walking through the market, you would have heard a surprising tapestry of sound. The clatter of Gaulish between merchants, the formal Latin of Roman diplomats after the conquest, and even the occasional phrase of Greek from traders or on official coinage. The written evidence is frustratingly sparse, like trying to reconstruct a novel from a handful of torn pages. A few precious lead tablets unearthed from sacred springs bear inscriptions in Gaulish but using the Greek alphabet. Pottery shards sometimes show scratched names or marks. The most telling evidence comes from those coins minted in the city itself, which used Greek letters to spell out the names of Aedui chieftains. This creates a fascinating puzzle. Why use a foreign alphabet to represent your own language? It speaks of a society at a cultural crossroads, adopting the most prestigious written tool available for commerce and authority. Much like a business today might use English in international dealings without abandoning its native tongue. This reliance on borrowed alphabets hints at a profound truth about Gaulish civilization. It was primarily an oral culture. The Druids, the keepers of law, history, and ritual, famously committed everything to memory, undergoing 20 years of training. This was not a sign of primitiveness, but of a different philosophy where knowledge was living, performed, and protected within a trained elite rather than fixed on vulnerable parchment. So how did a complex state like that of the Aedui function without reams of written records? Administration must have relied on a powerful combination of memorized lore, symbolic objects, and trusted messengers. Agreements were sealed with ritual gestures and witnessed oaths, their terms remembered and recited by specialists. The minting of coins itself was a form of non-verbal communication, the chieftain's name and symbols on the metal carrying his authority and guarantee of value across the land. This system worked brilliantly for generations, creating a resilient, adaptable culture where knowledge was personal and embedded in social relationships. Yet, this very strength became a fatal vulnerability during the Roman conquest. Rome was a civilization of the written word, laws, treaties, tax rolls, and military orders. When the Roman system clashed with the Gaulish oral tradition, the written word had a crushing advantage. It could be standardized, copied, sent over distances without distortion, and stored indefinitely. More devastatingly, Rome systematically dismantled the Druidic class, the living libraries of Gaul. As the Druids were suppressed, the vast oral encyclopedia of Gaulish lore, poetry, science, and history began to fade from memory. The language itself, under the pressure of Latin as the new language of power, law, and commerce, slowly retreated into the hills and farms before disappearing entirely within a few centuries. The loss is staggering to contemplate. It is not merely the loss of a language, but the loss of a world. We will never hear the epic poems sung in the halls of Bibracte, the precise legal judgments of the Druids, or the everyday jokes and lullabies of its families. The silence left behind is a void filled by Caesar's narrative and Roman interpretation. Every Gaulish word that faded took with it a unique way of seeing the world, a philosophy, a joke, a prayer. The linguistic enigma of Bibracte, therefore, is a ghost story of the most intimate kind, the echo of a people's voice, which once filled these streets with meaning, now reduced to fragments on lead and stone, a whispered reminder that some mysteries are lost not to time but to conquest. The world of Bibracte was not just built by human hands but sculpted by the very climate it stood upon. To understand the city's true story, we must look beyond the stones and into the soil itself, at the microscopic grains of pollen that have slept there for millennia. Scientists using a technique called palynology can analyze these ancient pollen samples, creating a detailed picture of the environment that surrounded the bustling oppidum. What they've found is a landscape of dramatic transformation. In the city's earliest days, the summit of Mont Beuvray was likely covered in a mixed forest of oak, beech, and ash. But as the population grew, the trees began to fall. The pollen record shows a sharp decline in tree species and a corresponding rise in grasses and cereals like wheat and barley. This is the signature of a massive deforestation event. The people of Bibracte needed timber for their immense walls, their homes, and their forges, and they needed cleared land to grow food for thousands. The mountaintop became an island of human activity in a sea of managed farmland and pasture that stretched down the slopes. This deliberate reshaping of the environment was a testament to their power, but it also made them vulnerable. A community dependent on local agriculture is always at the mercy of the seasons. While there's no evidence of a single catastrophic climate event destroying Bibracte, subtle shifts in temperature or rainfall patterns over decades could have strained their self-sufficiency. A series of poor harvests would have increased their reliance on trade, making the economic pull of the valley below even stronger. The very act of creating their city may have, over generations, undermined the environmental balance that made it possible. Then the people left, and in the silence that followed, one of history's most patient processes began: ecological succession. With no axes to hold it back, the forest started its long march back up the mountain. First came the pioneer species, hardy shrubs and fast-growing trees that could take root in the thin soils of abandoned fields and collapsed buildings. Their roots pried apart stonework, and their fallen leaves began building new layers of soil. Over decades, then centuries, a mature forest of oak and beech reclaimed the summit, its dense canopy casting a deep shade over the ruins. This was not a violent destruction, but a gentle, relentless embrace. The forest acted as a perfect preservative. The leaf litter and accumulating humus protected the ruins from the eroding force of wind and rain. It covered the stone foundations with a protective blanket, hiding them from looters and smoothing the sharp edges of history into soft green contours. The very process that created the lost city of legend was the same process that saved it for us. The stones were not plundered for later buildings because they were invisible, swallowed by the earth. The intricate layout of streets was not plowed under by later farmers because the land was considered wild, useless forest. This natural reclamation became a historical guardian, freezing Bibracte in a state of suspended animation. What we excavate today, then, is a city in a time capsule, sealed by soil and roots. The archaeology here has an unusual clarity because later civilizations did not build directly on top of it. We find the Gallic city and the Roman additions in startlingly direct sequence, with few of the confusing, overlapping layers common to continuously inhabited sites. The forest did not erase Bibracte, it mummified it. This natural phenomenon solves a final, beautiful paradox. The wilderness that made the city seem lost and mysterious to later generations was actually the agent of its perfect preservation. The slow creep of the woods, which might have seemed like nature reclaiming its own, was in fact creating the conditions for a future rediscovery. It makes you wonder what other lost capitals might lie sleeping beneath a blanket of quiet trees, their stories patiently waiting for the right moment to see the light again. The forest that hid Bibracte for centuries is now being peeled back by beams of light. Today, the quest to understand the lost city has entered a new era, driven by technologies that allow us to see through soil and foliage without ever lifting a trowel. The most transformative of these is LiDAR, which stands for light detection and ranging. Imagine a small aircraft flying over Mont Beuvray, sending down millions of laser pulses every second. These pulses pierce the dense canopy of leaves, strike the ground, and bounce back to a sensor. By measuring the time it takes for each laser to return, a computer can build an astonishingly precise three-dimensional map of the ground surface, digitally stripping away every tree, bush, and blade of grass. What remains is the ghostly imprint of human engineering. On these LiDAR maps, the long-buried ramparts of the murus gallicus appear as clear, raised lines snaking across the mountain. The faint depressions of ancient streets emerge like pale veins. Foundations of buildings, completely invisible to someone standing in the forest, resolve into neat geometric shapes. This technology has solved one of archaeology's oldest problems at Bibracte, the sheer scale of the site. Traditional excavation is slow and can only uncover small windows into the past. LiDAR gives us the entire blueprint at once, revealing that the city was even larger and more densely packed than previously believed, with suburbs and industrial zones extending into areas once thought empty. It poses new questions, too, about how these districts connected and evolved over time. On the ground, other silent tools are at work. Ground-penetrating radar sends radio waves into the earth, which bounce back when they hit something with a different density, like a stone wall or a filled-in pit. Archaeologists slowly drag the radar unit across a field, and it paints a cross-sectional image, a slice of the soil layers beneath their feet. This can reveal the depth and composition of foundations, locate hidden storage pits, or even detect the subtle differences in soil that mark where a wooden post once rotted away. Meanwhile, geomagnetic surveys measure tiny variations in the Earth's magnetic field. When ancient hearths or kilns were used, the intense heat actually realigns the magnetic minerals in the surrounding clay and stone, creating a permanent, detectable signature. Walking with a sensitive magnetometer, researchers can map these magnetic anomalies, revealing the locations of workshops, forges, and domestic hearths across vast areas. turning the entire mountain into a canvas of past human activity. These non-invasive methods are a revolution in ethics as much as in science. They allow us to explore without destroying. We can now ask big questions first, and then use targeted, careful excavation to test our theories, minimizing disturbance to the fragile archaeological record. The old mysteries of Bibracte, like the exact location of its grand assembly hall or the full circuit of its walls, are being answered with data, not guesswork. But each answer begets a new puzzle. Seeing the complete urban plan raises questions about traffic flow, water management on a city-wide scale, and how the social hierarchy was physically arranged across the landscape. The high-tech maps show us where to look, but the deeper mystery of how this society functioned day by day still requires the patient work of interpretation, connecting the digital dots into a story of human life. The story of Bibracte does not end with the last artifact lifted from the soil. It continues in a building that seems to have grown from the mountain itself, the Museum of Celtic Civilization. Perched on the edge of Mont Beuvray, this is not a traditional museum that shouts its presence. Architect Pierre-Louis Fallois designed it to be a silent participant in the landscape, a long, low structure of stone, glass, and weathering steel that follows the natural contour of the ridge. From a distance, it almost disappears, its roof a grassy extension of the hillside. This is architecture as a profound metaphor. The museum is built into the earth, just as archaeology is the act of carefully peeling back the earth to reveal history. You do not simply visit this museum, you descend into it, retracing the steps of an excavation as you walk down its gentle ramps, moving deeper into the story of the Gauls. Inside, the building orchestrates a powerful dialogue between the ancient and the modern. Its vast windows frame the actual site, the forested slopes where the city once stood, making the landscape itself the primary exhibit. You are constantly reminded that the objects in the glass cases did not come from some distant, abstract place. They came from right there, from the soil you can see through the glass. The museum's role is one of interpretation, of translating the silent language of stones and shards into a narrative we can understand. It houses the most evocative finds from the excavations, the delicate Latin fibulae, the massive iron nails from the Great Wall, the minting dies that stamped sovereignty into metal. But it goes far beyond displaying treasures. To truly bring Bibracte back to life, the museum employs a powerful combination of reconstruction and digital immersion. In one space, you might encounter a full-scale, cross-sectional model of the murus gallicus, its internal timber skeleton exposed, allowing you to finally grasp the ingenious engineering that written descriptions alone cannot convey. In another, a detailed diorama recreates a bustling craftsman's quarter, with figures casting bronze and firing pottery, filling in the ghostly outlines mapped by archaeologists with color, smoke, and purpose. Then you might step into a darkened room where a high-resolution digital projection sweeps across the walls. Suddenly, you are soaring over a computer-generated model of the entire oppidum at its peak, seeing its streets throng with virtual citizens, its walls standing tall, and its forges sending plumes of smoke into a digital sky. This virtual Bibracte is built from millions of data points gathered by LiDAR and ground surveys, a city resurrected from pure information. This is where the deep mysteries of the past fuel a vibrant present of education and engagement. The museum is not a mausoleum for dead things, it is a bridge. It takes the questions that haunt the site, the how and the why, and turns them into interactive experiences. A touchscreen might let you try your hand at planning the city's drainage channels, instantly seeing if your design would cause flooding. An audio station might surround you with the reconstructed sounds of the forest, the forge, and the marketplace, a sensory guess at the city's lost soundtrack. For a child, the mystery becomes a hands-on puzzle, for a student, a rigorous case study, and for any visitor, a tangible connection to a world that once seemed impossibly remote. The Museum of Celtic Civilization proves that the ultimate purpose of unearthing an ancient mystery is not to lock it away, but to rebuild it in the human imagination, ensuring that the lost city of the Gauls is not just a relic, but a living story for every new generation that walks its hidden streets. The quiet mountain is never truly still. Every summer, the forests of Mont Beuvray echo once more with the sound of scraping trowels and murmured conversations, as a new generation of archaeologists returns to the soil of Bibracte. This is not a museum frozen in time, but a living laboratory where the story of the Gauls is being rewritten in real time with every bucket of earth sifted. Right now, as we speak, teams from across Europe are hunched in trenches, chasing specific, tantalizing mysteries that the broad Lydia maps can only hint at. One major focus is the relentless search for the political heart of the city, the great assembly hall where Vercingetorix was proclaimed leader of the Gallic rebellion. While the general area is known, pinpointing the exact structure, its size and its architectural grandeur remains a holy grail. Researchers are meticulously excavating a promising zone near the center of the oppidum, peeling back layers to distinguish between a wealthy private residence and a true public building capable of hosting hundreds of chieftains. Each stone foundation, each post hole, is a clue in a 2,000-year-old architectural puzzle. Another trench, opened just last season, targets the city's industrial metabolism. We know Bibracte produced iron on a massive scale, but how exactly did this industry organize itself? A new excavation in a sector dense with slag is mapping the complete life cycle of a workshop, from the ore storage area and the furnace bases to the anvil stations and the waste pits. The goal is to understand the workflow, the specialization of laborers, and even the health impacts on the ancient workers themselves, by analyzing soil samples for microscopic pollutants. Just a few meters away, a separate team is investigating something seemingly mundane, a deep, layered dump of pottery shards and animal bones, but this refuse is a gold mine. By studying the cut marks on bones and the types of broken vessels, scientists can reconstruct dietary habits with stunning precision, revealing what a feast for the elite looked like compared to the daily meal of a blacksmith's family, and how those diets changed under Roman influence. Perhaps the most exciting ongoing work is at the edges. The formidable murus gallicus defined the city's limit, but where exactly were its gates and how were they fortified? A current campaign is tracing the wall's course through a densely wooded section, using ground-penetrating radar to locate a suspected entrance complex. The hope is to find the stone foundations of guard chambers, the pivot stones for massive wooden doors, and the wear patterns on the road that would reveal the flow of ancient traffic in and out. Each discovery here changes our mental image of the city, transforming a simple line on a map into a dynamic portal of control and commerce. These are not treasure hunts, they are forensic investigations. Every seed, every rusted nail, every layer of ash is catalogued, scanned, and analyzed in on-site laboratories. A fragment of painted plaster can tell us about the colors that adorned a wealthy Gaul's walls. A single preserved seed of a non-native plant can trace a trade route from the Mediterranean. The questions driving these digs are remarkably human. How did the city govern itself? How did its people work, eat, and move through their world? And how did all of this slowly, inexorably, adapt and then cease? This constant state of discovery means our understanding of Bibracte is perpetually provisional. A theory held for decades can be overturned by a single season's find in a trench only 2 meters square. The archaeology here is a conversation with the past, where the ground offers cryptic answers that always lead to new, better questions. To walk the site during an excavation is to feel history as a present tense verb, to witness the literal unearthing of a mystery that is still breathing. It is a powerful reminder that the lost city of the Gauls is not a closed book on a shelf, but a living narrative with its next page being carefully brushed clean of dirt right now under an open French sky. A city can be conquered, abandoned, and forgotten, yet its story is never truly over. The final, compelling mystery of Bibracte is not about its ancient end, but about its modern rebirth. Long after the forest sealed its fate, this lost capital was deliberately resurrected, not from stone, but from symbolism, becoming a powerful vessel for a nation's search for its soul. In the 19th century, as France forged its modern identity after revolution and empire, it needed heroes and myths that predated kings and emperors. The narrative of Vercingetorix and his doomed stand against Rome, crystallized in the halls of Bibracte, provided a perfect foundational myth. Here was a figure of patriotic resistance, a unified Gaul fighting for liberty against a foreign invader. Bibracte transformed from an obscure archaeological site into the sacred birthplace of French nationhood, a place where the spirit of independence was first kindled. This symbolic resurrection was a conscious act of memory politics, turning a Celtic chieftain into a national icon and his mountain capital into a monument. The mystery lies in this transformation, how a historical footnote was amplified into a cornerstone of cultural identity. Today, that legacy has evolved once more. Bibracte is no longer just a French symbol, but a European one. Its designation as a UNESCO World Heritage Site formally recognized it as belonging to the cultural heritage of all humanity. This status frames the oppidum not as the origin point of a single nation, but as a crucial node in the vast, interconnected Celtic world that stretched from the Atlantic to the Black Sea. On Mont Beuvray, you will now hear a chorus of languages, not just French. Archaeologists and students from across Europe collaborate in its soil. Annual festivals celebrate Celtic music, art, and culture, drawing visitors who feel a connection to these pan-European roots. The city has regained its voice, but it now speaks in a different tongue, one of shared heritage rather than isolated nationalism. It has become a place of reconciliation where the legacy of Rome and Gaul is studied not as a story of victor and vanquished, but as the complex, painful birth of a continent's identity. The stones are the same, but the story they tell has expanded. The mystery of its modern legacy answers a profound human need, the need to find anchors in the deep past, to claim a lineage that gives meaning to the present. Bibracte teaches us that history is never static. It is a conversation where every generation asks the ruins new questions and hears new answers echoing back. Bibracte is more than a single city on a hill. It is a compressed history of an entire civilization, a perfect miniature of Celtic Gaul from its proud zenith to its quiet, transformative end. Every mystery we have walked through, from the engineering of its walls to the panic in its buried coin hoards, is not an isolated puzzle. Each is a vital chapter in one grand, continuous story, the story of what happens when two powerful worlds collide. The independent peak of Gaul is written in the very stones of the oppidum. Its sophisticated urban planning, its industrial might, and its druidic spiritual life represent the pinnacle of a culture that had evolved its own complex answers to the challenges of society, economy, and faith. This was not a primitive backwater awaiting Roman enlightenment. It was a mature, innovative civilization, confident in its own strength, as symbolized by the unshakable murus gallicus. The fierce resistance of Gaul is captured in that single, electric moment when rival chieftains united under Vercingetorix within its walls. Bibracte became the brain of the rebellion, proving that the Celtic spirit of independence could, under extreme pressure, forge a fragile unity. The artifacts of war from its workshops and the scorched earth strategy planned here are the physical echoes of a people willing to burn their own world to save it from foreign domination. Then comes the complex, messy encounter with Rome. This is not a simple tale of barbarians versus legions. It is written in the subtle layers of archaeology, in the Roman bathhouse built atop a Celtic chieftain's hall. It is in the personal choice of a noble family who buried their ancestor with both a traditional Celtic sword and a fine Roman wine cup. Bibracte shows us that conquest was followed by a painful, pragmatic negotiation. The local elite made calculated choices, adopting Roman comforts and political language not necessarily because they admired Rome, but because it was the only way to retain any shred of influence in the new order. Their identity became a careful blend, a survival strategy etched in stone and pottery. Finally, the city embodies the ultimate transformative integration into the Roman world. Its abandonment was the final act of this assimilation. The population did not just move downhill to Autun for better plumbing. They moved because the center of gravity had irrevocably shifted. Power, commerce, and social ambition now flowed along Roman roads and convened in Roman forums. Leaving the ancestral mountain was the last logical step in a generations-long process of becoming something new, of ceasing to be purely Gaulish and becoming Gallo-Roman. The empty streets are the ultimate artifact of this cultural metamorphosis. So when we piece together these mysteries, we are not just solving the riddle of a lost city. We are watching the entire arc of ancient Gaul play out on a single dramatic stage. Bibracte's life, from its rise as a tribal capital to its death as a redundant symbol, mirrors the fate of a continent in transition. Its stones hold the blueprint of indigenous brilliance, the scars of violent conflict, the fingerprints of cultural compromise, and the quiet dust of irreversible change. To understand this one place is to hold a lens to a pivotal moment in human history, where one world faded and another was forged from its ashes. What then does this microcosm tell us about the nature of civilization itself? Is its story one of tragic loss or of inevitable, if painful, evolution? So the mountain holds its silence, but it is a silence full of voices. Our journey through these 20 mysteries of Bibracte has taken us from the first oak timbers of its mighty wall to the last quiet footsteps leading downhill. We have walked its planned streets, felt the heat of its industrial forges, and stood in the imagined clearing where druids once spoke to the gods. We witnessed a conspiracy of chieftains and the winter occupation of a conqueror who wrote history from the heart of his conquest. This is not the story of a primitive people waiting for civilization to arrive. It is the story of a civilization that built its own. Bibracte shatters the simplistic label of barbarian forever. These were city planners, hydrological engineers, master metallurgists, and sophisticated traders connected to a continent. They minted coins, managed complex economies, and created art of breathtaking abstract beauty. Their society possessed its own logic, its own genius, and its own profound connection to the world around it. Their end was not a failure, but a transformation, a slow bending into the new shape of the Roman world until the old form was no longer needed. The great mystery of Bibracte is ultimately a human one. It asks us how a people defines itself, how it resists change, and how it ultimately adapts to survive. The stones on Mont Beuvray are not relics of a dead past. They are participants in an ongoing conversation. Every laser scan, every carefully brushed shard of pottery, every summer dig is a new question posed to the earth. The city's rediscovery is a process, not an event, a continuous dialogue between our curiosity and its buried truths. So the story does not end here. Which of its mysteries spoke to you most? Was it the ingenious strength of the Gallic wall, the panic buried in a pot of coins, or the silent spiritual power of the offering pits? Share your thoughts below, and if you want to join more expeditions into the shadows of forgotten history, be sure to subscribe, for the past is never truly lost. It only waits patiently for us to listen.